David Suzuki, quel honneur. Bienvenue au Frontières à Verdun. So you found your way to Montreal. Vous avez trouvé votre chemin, ça va là. OK. Est-ce que vous parlez un petit peu français? Do you speak a little French? Un petit peu. You Canadians. Vous êtes tous pareils. So, pour les gens qui vous ne connaissent pas, est-ce que vous pouvez juste me dire qui vous êtes, ce que vous avez fait?
Well, I'm a professor, but now retired at the University of British Columbia. My area, I'm a scientist, a geneticist. I study heredity and in insects. But ever since 1962, I've been doing television.
The thrill of gravity, the shock of inertia, the excitement of centrifugal force, you can find it all here.
So I began my career in 1962 in television, really to promote science. But in 1962, a woman came along and got me sidetracked. Now, this happens all my life. But I never met this woman. Her name was Rachel Carson.
Okay.
In 1962, Rachel Carson published a book called Silent Spring, and it was all about pesticides. And for me and millions of people around the world, that book just completely shifted us. And so I began working with television to promote science and ended up promoting the environment. But I became very involved in British Columbia. I was testified against offshore drilling for oil. I testified against building a big dam on the Peace River. I fought many, many years to the present day against clear-cut logging, against polluting pulp mills. So I became swept up in the environmental movement.
OK. Les pesticides, qu'est-ce qui a changé en 40 ans? What has changed?
Nothing.
Really?
We're just using more, and we're using more pesticides today than we were in 1962, except that because the insects are now resistant, we have to use different kinds, which are more powerful.
They're big like that today.
And you think of the farmers now. The farmers, before they spray, they get in a uniform, and they put a mask and everything. Why? Because it's poisonous. And to think that we put that onto our food, and then we feed it to people, do we think it disappears? It's in the food. People don't understand that in most homes in the city where they use chemicals, the concentration of pesticides is higher, 6 times higher than on a farmer's field. 3 times higher than in our public parks. Because people just take these and spray, and they think, they don't think what they're doing.
Mais vous faites pas ça chez vous? Don't you do that at your home?
No, ours is
what do you
chemical-free, pesticide-free zone.
Le Québec est absent de votre livre, L'équilibre sacré. Le Québec est absent de la série de télé sur CBC. Québec est vraiment absent de votre travail, ou je me trompe?
There are the two solitudes, and I regret that very much. I'm embarrassed that I came and handed you out a document, and there's only the English version. But we have a small environmental organization, and in order to fulfill the duality and translate, it's simply too expensive for us. So we have to try to form partnerships.
Vous avez aucune aide gouvernementale?
We do not take any government money.
Pourquoi?
Because governments are very good. They give you a grant, then they give you another grant. Then they say, well, we've decided we're going to shift our focus next year, so we aren't going to. So then the next thing you say, oh, okay, well, we'll move over that way. And then next thing you know, you're going where the government wants you. So we wanted to be free of that, to be able to do and say what the science tells us. And it was very difficult in the beginning, because my wife and I were paying for all the people.
De votre gros salaire que vous faisiez à CBC, from your big salary that you were doing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No. Science, you don't make money.
Ça, c'est pour le David Suzuki Foundation.
Yes.
Qui pose des gestes écologiques, environnementaux, qui protestent, qu'est-ce que vous...
No, we're not like Greenpeace. We are a science-based organization. So we try to hire people who will do the best scientific study. But then the most as important is to take that work and to transmit it to the people. So we try to spend half of our money on communication. There's no other group that does that effort.
Bon, mais parlez-moi de ça. Dans votre livre, vous l'abordez. La facilité, en tout cas, votre capacité de faire passer le message environnemental dans les journaux. Vous parlez du Globe and Mail, du National Post, et qui sont intéressés finalement que par les joueurs de hockey, par les business stars, par les vedettes de rock et de cinéma.
We live in a country, and I'm sure it's the same in Quebec, where science is simply not a part of our culture. We regard science as that little specialized area out there. And we really are wrapped up in Canada in politics, in business, in celebrity, in sports. And when you look at the amount of time that we devote to that, it's phenomenal. And there's another problem with the media. The media will report a dramatic event, a crisis, a flood in Europe, a hurricane in the Caribbean, forest fires in northern Alberta. But the media behave as if these are all independent events. This is reported over here. This is reported here. There is no sense that we live in a single world in which these are not independent events. And I think, to me, this is the great crisis we face now. It's not so much the failure to report science. It is that we now are shattering the world. We no longer realize in the world everything is connected to everything else.
Mais qu'est-ce qui arriverait si on regardait les nouvelles économiques, les nouvelles culturelles, les nouvelles politiques, les nouvelles sociales d'une façon, dans un ensemble?
Well, I think that people would be shocked to realize that, for example, our ability to buy fresh apples in February in Montreal is because that apple was shipped from New Zealand all the way up here. But if they looked at that in a holistic way, they would see all of that required pesticides there, which go in the air and the water, required planes and things to bring the apple up here, making greenhouse gases, and that all of that is changing the weather, and that's melting the ice in the north, and that means the forests are now not able to. So if that was reported in a holistic way, we would see the consequences of the way we live. Every one of us has used on our behalf machines. We get in a car, we use a typewriter, we do all kinds of things which have repercussions for the rest of the world. Because in the world, everything is connected. But if we continue to live in a world that is fragmented and shattered, then there is no responsibility. We buy a great big SUV. We live in the middle of a city. What the hell are we doing with a big car like that that's supposed to be running out in the forest through the, you know, when do you...
Mais à Montréal, il y a des gros nippons. We have big potholes in the streets. You know?
When do you see an SUV covered in mud? No, they're all nice and shiny because there are little people driving around in the city.
Right.
But when you buy that, nobody thinks, oh, I'm affecting climate. Because we live in a shattered world. Up until very recently, people understood the world is a single unit, that we are a part of nature, and what we do affects nature. That's what our songs and our rituals and our dances were to celebrate that.
C'est ce qu'on voit dans la série.
And to promise that we will do the right thing. We don't have that anymore.
Dans votre livre, vous parlez du sommet de Rio, 1992. Il y a l'avertissement des scientifiques du monde à l'humanité, qui dit, en gros, que si on ne fait rien pour améliorer la situation, on a 10 ans et après, on est foutu.
Oui.
Qu'est-ce qui est arrivé depuis? Ça fait 10 ans, là. Novembre 2002, on est là maintenant.
Well, we've been going the wrong direction. Things are getting worse. And in many ways, what I said in 1992 is, I feel as if we're in a big car. We're driving right at a brick wall at 100 miles an hour, and everybody in the car is saying, I want to drive, I want to drive. Who cares who's driving? Somebody's got to put the brakes on and turn the wheel.
Right.
But some of us are saying that, but they've got us locked in the trunk. Nobody hears us. So we're going at the wall.
Straight.
And that's what that statement said. We may have as little as 10 years. 10 years is gone.
C'était 1600 scientifiques de 71 pays. Là-dessus, la moitié sont des prix Nobel. Et personne les écoute.
That's right.
We don't care.
The media The media don't pay attention because I don't know why, but none of the major American networks or CBC covered it. The Washington Post, the New York Times said, this is not newsworthy. Half of all Nobel Prize winners saying we may have as little as 10 years to avoid a catastrophe, and this is not newsworthy. Well, that's, you know, that's a very frightening thing. 10 years have come and gone, and things have got worse. Now we're having this big debate over Kyoto. Kyoto is a tiny little bump along the road that we have to go.
Pouvez-vous expliquer Kyoto pour qu'on comprenne c'est quoi?
It's very difficult. In 1988, there was a major conference in Toronto of atmospheric scientists. They said in 1988, we are beginning to put out too much greenhouse gas. The greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide, trap heat on the planet, and we are getting warmer. So they called in 1988 for a 20% reduction in greenhouse gases
14
in
years
15
ago.
years.
Right.
Now, in 1992, 4 years later, there was a major conference in Rio. George Bush said, I'm not going. I'm not going to go. They said, please, please, Mr. Bush, the United States must come. What will it take? He said, wait, I don't want all that stuff about global warming. So in order to get Mr. Bush to come to Rio, they said, okay, all we'll do is take 1990 levels, and we'll say, we're going to stay at that level by the year 2000. That was, so from a 20% reduction, they're now saying 1990 levels, and we'll stabilize.
Avec un programme d'échange de pollution entre pays, les États peuvent échanger des taux de pollution. C'est de la folie furieuse. Il n'y a rien qui va changer.
Of course, and that, what people don't understand is that emissions trading is a made-in-Canada protocol. I was at Kyoto. The Canadian delegation, especially the Alberta delegation, they were saying, no, we don't want this, we want credit. They moaned and groaned so much that they put those loopholes in. So now Mr. Klein says, we want a made-in-Canada solution. The Kyoto Protocol is a made-in-Canada solution. The European community, they wanted a 15% cut. And they wanted a much tighter demand.
Instead of what, of 4 or
6%?
6.
Yeah. So because of Canada and the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, because of those countries, they watered it down. But that, to me, that's a made in Canada.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de Ralph Klein qui dit que Jean Chrétien n'est pas très intelligent quand il parle justement du protocole de Kyoto?
In fact, I spoke to Mr. Chrétien on Friday, last Friday.
Oh, you're big.
And, well, it's the first time he called me. And I think it was because people were beating him up, and he wanted to say, where are you guys? Where, you know, everybody's beating up on me. Where are you guys? But he mentioned Ralph Klein, who said he's not very intelligent. I think that is one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Has Mr. Klein ever looked in the mirror? But Mr.
Qu'est-ce que vous êtes en train de dire à propos de Mr. Klein?
Well, I mean, I think it's the pot calling the kettle black. I mean, he's never indicated to me that he's got much IQ points up there, but he certainly drinks a lot. But anyway, that's not necessarily bad.
But he's a friend of the business.
But Mr. Chrétien was obviously hurt by that.
He may be hurt by that, but what is he doing?
Well, he said he's not going to get down and argue the way Klein is, but he said to me, I'm going to put it before Parliament in December, it's going to pass.
Mais il s'en va. Jean Chrétien s'en va de la politique. Là, il se réveille.
You know, the problem with politicians, of course, is when they get elected, their immediate concern is re-election. So whatever they do, they have to be able to get a result before the next election. Global warming, Brian Mulroney knew this. Brian Mulroney came in, he appointed Lucien Bouchard as Minister of the Environment.
Jean Charest.
And Jean Charest. But Lucien Bouchard was a rising star. And he was a damn good environment minister when he was in there. But the public was concerned, and they put him in there. Now, Mulroney did a study to say how much would it cost to reduce greenhouse gas by 20% in 15 years. Could we do it? The report came back and said, yes, we can do it, and we will save $150 billion.
Billion.
Yes.
Milliard.
Billion.
Yeah.
But it would cost $50 billion you have to invest that first. Then 15 years later, you save $150 billion. That report has never been released in the public. Because Brian Mulroney knew damn well he won't be around 15 years from now. Why should he say, I'm sorry, I've got to invest $50 billion when someone else will get credit for it later?
Alors, quand Jean Charest me dit il y a eu des progrès depuis 1992, c'est de la bullshit. La qualité de l'eau s'est améliorée. Il y a eu beaucoup d'efforts pour réduire les produits. Tout ça, c'est faux. He was bullshitting.
Of course he was.
Yeah.
He may have believed it, though. The thing is, was he just deliberately telling you that, or does he believe it? You see, that's the question. A lot of these guys believe it.
Non, il m'a dit qu'il faut rester optimiste.
Really?
Il faut croire que les choses vont s'améliorer. Est-ce que vous croyez qu'il faut penser comme ça?
Non.
Quand je lisais votre livre, j'étais assis sur le bord de la piscine, je fumais un cigare, j'étais en speedo. You can't talk to me about nature while I'm living in the city. It touches me. Species are disappearing, but I don't care.
Yes. I think that's the great challenge we face. Most Canadians, we think of Canada as a wilderness. That's bullshit. The vast majority of us live in big cities like this. We live in a human-created world where it's very easy to think, no, we're not like other species. We're so smart, we create our own habitat. We don't need nature. I have many people that say that. Well, who gives a shit if the grizzly bears are gone? That's good. I can go hiking and don't have to worry about them. So what I tried to do in the book is say the most important reality of our lives is that we're still animals. And as animals, what do we need? If you don't have clean air, you're dead in a matter of minutes. If you don't have clean water, if you don't have clean food that comes from the soil, forget it. So surely protecting the air, the water, the soil, the sunlight, those have got to come before anything else. But we've got so twisted around, we say, no, the economy. The economy is the source of everything. So I have had a minister of the environment who said, we can't afford to protect the environment. If we don't have a strong growing economy, we can't protect the environment. But I say, wait a minute now, if we don't have an environment, you don't have people. You don't have economists or business. We've got everything screwed up in our heads. The most extreme case of this is in Alberta right now. You have a premier who's saying, we can't begin to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions because it will ruin our economy. At the same time, they've had a drought for 2 years. Their farmers had to beg for hay from the rest of Canada. That costs money. They are having major forest fires in the northern part of Alberta. That costs money. But he hasn't put it together that maybe that's got something to do with burning oil. You see, so that's the problem I was saying earlier. When you shatter the world, you can't see the connections. Right. So people can literally say the implementation of Kyoto will ruin our economy. But nobody has ever said, how much will it cost us if we don't implement Kyoto? 16,000 Canadians die every year of air pollution. Much of that air pollution is coming from burning fossil fuels. So not only is that carbon dioxide going up and warming the planet, it's killing people at the ground level.
Est-ce que le smog va finalement être le point de départ du mouvement écologique?
I think that when something touches people immediately,
in the city, where is the population?
They get interested.
Yeah.
And so this summer, the 46 days of smog in Toronto.
Yeah.
Believe me, in Toronto, people are concerned about Kyoto.
Well, in Montreal too.
And in the Maritimes. The Maritimes now are getting smog where they never had smog.
Est-ce que vous pensez comme Hubert Reeves, qui dit qu'en 2050, peut-être qu'il n'y aura plus personne, où les gens vont mourir, l'humanité va être en danger?
Well, I don't say that. I think that we're in deep trouble. I certainly think that over the long run, the chances that humanity will survive as a species is a very big question.
Ça, c'est dans 50 ans.
Wow, that's, yeah.
Vous avez une fille de quoi?
I don't want to say, I mean, I can't face that because I have grandchildren. My life is over. But it just grieves me that my grandchildren are being faced with that reality. Whether they survive or not, you know, that's just a horrifying idea. I know that the places I went fishing with my father when I was 5 or 6.
C'était où?
In BC, British Columbia.
Okay.
I can't take my grandchildren there because there are no fish there. And all over the world, when I talk to elders, I have been to the Amazon, I have been to the Serengeti in Africa, to Madagascar, to Papua New Guinea. I try to find the oldest person when I go and say, what was it like here when you were a kid? And everywhere they say the same thing. It used to be so different. There used to be trees as far as you could see. The skies used to be filled with birds at certain times of the year. The fish would jam the rivers at certain times of the year, but it's different. So, I mean, if it used to be, but they're not anymore, where have they gone? You know, they're not anywhere. So our elders are telling us in their lifetimes, the planet has been degraded that much.
Mais on les écoute pas. We don't listen to them.
Because we're all caught up in, whoa, the internet and our big shopping malls, and look at all this stuff. You see, the terrible thing is, we went through this huge depression in the 1930s. When World War II happened, we got out of the depression. The American economy just went up like that. As the war was coming to an end, the President of the United States said, what can we do in peacetime? How can we keep the economy going? And the Economic Council of Advisors studied this and came back and they said, consumption. We've got to make consumption an American way of life. We have to worship at the altar of consumption. Buy stuff, use it up, throw it away, and buy more stuff. And if you get them disposable, use it once and throw it away, then you'll never run out of people to sell things to. And it worked. But it's now an economy built on destroying the earth. Every bit of that economy has got to come out of the earth. Or when we're done with it, go back to the earth. So we've created this engine of the way we live, but it is unbelievably destructive. And we're caught up in that, and we're dazzled by it. Most people on the planet today were born after 1950. So to them, all of this change is completely normal. And they feel it's going to go on forever. It can't. If you look at humanity over hundreds of thousands of years, this little blip is very abnormal. And it cannot keep going like that. It's going to come crashing down. But because we have a short life, we've gone through this huge period of growth. People think, oh, this is great. This has got to go on.
Qu'est-ce que vous faites pour ne pas déprimer, pour ne pas vous mettre une balle dans la tête?
We have to have sustainable activism. We have to be sustainable environmentalists.
Ouais.
Too many of my friends in environmentalism have committed suicide. It's shocking, the number of people. Yes, because it is a very depressing thing. And I think that we have to constantly renew our spirit. We have to be in this forever. Yeah. We can't just burn out and give up. We've got to have sustainable environmentalism. And for me, it's to get out in nature as often as I can. Right. Because when you're back in nature, you get your time frame figured out. It's a spiritual renewal. But let me just say that we find over and over, people listen to my foundation's message, but they keep saying, what can I do? I'm just one person out of 6.2 billion people. I'm insignificant. What difference does it make? So we have tried to look at where do ordinary people, their lifestyle, where do they affect nature? It turns out there are 3 areas. The way we transport ourselves, our cars, food, and in our houses, the kind of houses. Okay. We have come up with 10 simple steps or things you can do. For example, if you give up eating meat 1 day a week, that's all it takes. The impact, if there are thousands and thousands of us giving up meat 1 day a week. You used to do that in Quebec all the time on Friday, right?
Oh, please. Not in my lifetime.
But if you do that, the effect on air and water is tremendous. It takes 85 times as much water to make a 10-ounce serving of meat as it does to make a 10-ounce serving of potatoes. So meat is very destructive of air and water.
Une fois par semaine. Once a week.
Once a week.
Okay.
And we're saying, if you can not take your car to work 1 day a week, take a bus, walk, bike, whatever, that's all we're asking. Take those steps. Change your hot water heater so that it's much more insulated. Save energy in your house by 10%. It'll make you money, and it will have a huge effect. So what we're trying to do is we're challenging Canadians, we're challenging Québécois in English. We're asking you, take the challenge, what we call the nature challenge. Come to my website, davidsuzuki.org, take the challenge, and commit yourself to doing only 3 of the 10 things.
So leads this.
But what we want to do is we want to get hundreds of thousands of Canadians to say, yes, we're going to do that.
Okay.
Politicians cannot ignore something if hundreds of thousands of Canadians...
Et David, je suis obligé de vous dire quelque chose. Si vous voulez changer quelque chose au Canada, il faut que vous ayez les Québécois avec vous. You see, all the prime ministers are from Quebec. You have to, to understand.
I am taking my baby step here.
Oui.
Here I am on your program.
C'est excellent.
I say to the Québécois, please...
Non, pas plus. Mais dites aux Québécois, je vais faire traduire le site Internet. Il va être en français d'ici 6 mois.
We will. I guarantee.
Merci beaucoup, David Suzuki. Merci.